All right, our next item up is the review and discussion and potential vote related to the PERA report related to the investigation on April 19th. So, Jose, I think this one is yours as well.
Surprise, surprise. So first and foremost, I'll state on this agenda item, we don't necessarily, if I'm not mistaken, we don't necessarily have a vote planned. However, the thinking was to put the language in there just in case the board wanted to make a vote as to this investigation. I want to take a step back because prior to Sunday evening, our main focus was the releasing of the review that we did into the April 19 incident featuring Sergeant Hanley and the report that we published. I have asked, first and foremost, I want to acknowledge and thank Eugene for his excellent work on that report. There have been many questions about what it is that PERA does, what it is that PERA is supposed to do. And when I'm advocating for the civilian perspective to be part of any investigation, this report is an example of what I mean. As an attorney, I've seen, again, how we can kind of get caught up in what the law is, of what the practices are. But I think the purpose here at PERA is to make sure that the civilian perspective is at the table. And for this being our very first report, our very first high-profile investigation looking into, I think that our investigator did an excellent job, and I wanted to appreciate him for that. For the people, and generally speaking, for the folks on the board or in the community who have been asking me what's next in that sense, on the one hand, we've had discussions about the fact that PERA is, in a sense, somewhat limited in terms of our authority under the statute. We can review investigations, and my argument is that review should, in some cases, happen simultaneously, not be a review after the fact, but a review of what's happening at the moment. And we can make recommendations to the city. We obviously don't have the power to vote and enforce these recommendations, but through our relationships with the city council, through our relationships with the mayor's office and state legislature, we can advocate for these changes. And so now that we've published that report to the public, what we'll be working on and what we are working on is trying to implement some of the changes we recommended. I would say that the changes that were recommended in, or at least the recommendations that were made in the report, are at least threefold. There are a number of Providence Police Department policies that have come into question with this case, with the April 19 case. One of them is Providence Policy 200.39, the duty to report information. We found that there was a lack of that in this case, that there was, I don't want to misstate the facts. I'm glad that Eugene did such a good job accumulating them. I don't want to state them differently, but the bottom line is that here there could have been a better job done reporting what happened on this scene. That was obviously very concerning. Another policy under the umbrella of policies, which is point number one, would be 200.2, obedience to laws and rules. We want to, with each one of these policies, as we're empowered to do in the law, we want to engage with the police department, make recommendations for changes, and in this case, try to evaluate and analyze what is it that happened, how is it different from the policy, and why did that happen, and what we can do to make sure this doesn't happen again. And the third is obviously 300.01, which is use of force, right? There are clearly some uses of force here that were outside of the ambit of what we would expect to be reasonable or appropriate in that case. And so use of force is a very complicated topic. I mean, it's under the law. And that's, again, underscores the significance of having the civilian perspective at the table, right? Sometimes we need to separate from what it is that is the legal analysis and just ask the basic fundamental questions from a civilian perspective, like, is this okay? You know, I know in years past, there have been conversations about whether it's ever appropriate to pull a person by their hair, right? You might be able to analyze it under the use of force and say that it is, but that fundamental question should be asked, right? Like, how are we treating human beings? So that would be point number one in terms of our recommendations and things that we're looking into.